Hello, friends, and welcome back to the Popcast. Whenever you are listening to this, whether it be live or a VOD, Twitch or YouTube, while you're watching a Snickers commercial, eat Snickers apparently, celebrating Columbus Day, even though Columbus was an extremely horrible person, watching a VOD review of your team as they played in the College Cephalopod Association tournament this past weekend, or crying about Double Nautilus and being a total jackass on Twitter and doubling down on being a total jackass on Twitter. Whatever it is that you're doing right now, I appreciate you taking the time out of your day to listen to this. Unless I don't. And welcome in to the awkward noon time slot that I do every now and then. Not so much awkward for you guys, it is for me because I am not used to being awake at this hour. Sometimes my work schedule doesn't really allow me to do the usual 6 o'clock time frame, but it's nice to see some of the faces that only come out for the noon podcast here on the Twitch chat. So hello to you guys and good morning. Oh, actually, it is good nooning. I know I think about it. Today, I will be recapping the Launchpoint Draft Cup, as well as discussing this trend of teams giving themselves Luti divisions that has been going on in the past several months. Awkward time for sure. But first, before we get into that, I want to give a shout out to one team in particular. I've often talked about teams that I feel like go about things the right way. When I interviewed Xanadu and the West Broadway Grillers after they won Low Inc., I told them just that. I told them that they were role models for the mid to lower level community on how to start a team from scratch and to grow it, not by disbanding after a month when you lose one tournament, which is what we see several teams do, unfortunately. Several teams that have promise that do that. But instead, by grinding it out from the bottom as a team and growing together. That is why I was a little sad when I saw that Eurobeats had disbanded after being an active team for over a year now. Now, they might not have the same kind of resume as the other teams I mentioned, the Xanadu and West Broadway Grillers. Their biggest claim to fame being a strong third place finish in Ash Cup number 5, beating Persistence and Ravenous Raccoons. But that doesn't mean the impact that they had on the lower level community wasn't just as strong. We need to celebrate these teams that stick around for a long time. These teams that have formed bonds that will last a lifetime between each members on the team. For Eurobeats, they were a fun team to watch. All the rivalries they formed, the games they played against ITAP, all the battles they had in Low Inc. from Gamma to Top Cut. That's right, they did make Top Cut in the past. And this isn't the end for these players. It wouldn't surprise me if we saw them on different teams in the future. I already know Haya is on a new team, I believe it's pronounced Xylo, which made their debut in the Ink for Pink tourney this past weekend. But for your beats, I salute you guys. And thank you for being a role model team in this community. And whenever the next team that has been around for a long time disbands, I will be sure to give them a shout out as well. Because we need to celebrate teams like this. Now, teams are going to disband eventually. Things don't always work out. It happens. But when a team actually sticks together for that amount of time in the lower level community, they deserve to be recognized for that. So, hiya there, Eurobeats. So, I was on Twitter last night, looking to see who was trying to get themselves canceled today, or who was saying the most offensive thing they could possibly come up with, which seems to be a growing trend in the in the Splatoon community lately. I come across this team who is posting a recruitment ad. They're looking for a player. Now, this team, I'm not going to give their name away, and I'm not like shaming this team or anything, but this is a low ink team, a team that has not won low ink before, and they were presenting themselves in the ad as a team that is Div 2 to Div 3, and they were looking specifically for players that are Div 2 plus experience. And as I was reading that ad, the first thing that popped into my mind was this team saying they're Div 2. No, you're not. No, you're not. I know these guys somewhat. There's no way. But this is the trend that we're kind of seeing now on Twitter, is that, and not just Twitter, on Discord as well, especially when teams are asking for scrims, people are just coming up with their own divs now. I'd say we got about 50 teams that are claiming they are Div 3 right now, even though only 24 teams actually get a div like that. So we're kind of in this awkward time right now because Luti divs haven't been updated since what, April? So we're about 6 months since the last Luti season when a div got put out. So I guess it's understandable that teams are like, well, I'm much better than what I was 6 months ago. I'm not Div 5 anymore. I'm easily Div 3. But now, is the problem here that teams are inflating their own ego? Kind of. But the real issue here is how we perceive Luti as a whole. The type of credit that we are giving Luti when in reality, we really shouldn't be putting this kind of pressure on Luti to be giving us rankings for the entire system. Now, if you've listened to the Popcast, and I know you have, last week I interviewed Magic 8 Ball, the Magic 8 Ball. I had a really great conversation with him about a wide variety of things, mainly his work with the College Cephalopod Association. But before that, I asked him a few questions about the community as a whole. And one of the things I brought up to him was, are Luti divs relevant? Now, he shares the same thoughts I kind of do, in that Luti divs are pointless. They're just seedings for the Luti tournament. They're not meant to be rankings as a whole. But how did this happen? How did we take a seeding from one tournament and blow it up into a ranking system to define the entire community? Well, let's look at this. Let's look at what Luti actually does when it comes to ranking teams for their tournament. First, they gather up a council of players. I think I don't know the exact number, but it's somewhere from 7 to 10 players. And it's not just like any Yahoo they find on the street. These are actual legit people that pay attention to the community. You have to submit an application. You need to have some sort of resume and an understanding of a wide gap of the community. They do bring in some people from SAC who actually pay attention to the lower level community. I would assume, I can't guarantee, maybe Hohen might know, but I would assume there might be one or two low ink people that are a part of that as well. So it's not just they're seeding like Div 1 through 3 of the well-known teams, and then just like all the lower level teams is just like, I guess these guys are 5. Let's just throw them in here. No, they're getting actual people that pay attention to the lower level, who will accurately rank the teams at the bottom just as thoroughly as they rank teams at the top, which is good. They bring these guys in, and they have a whole week where they discuss things, where they share their ideas, and they're like, I put this team at this spot, and well, I put this team at this spot. So there's a conversation that goes on there. So there's actually, again, it's well thought out. It's constructive, and in my opinion, is the best way to kind of go about ranking all the teams that sign up for something like Luti, which for this past season was 211 teams. So in my opinion, if you're going to rank 211 teams, That's exactly how you do it. You bring in experts, you let them sit at a table for a week and figure it all out. You let them vote for their thing, and then you take all of that input together and you compile it into one spreadsheet that lists teams from top to bottom. That's how a ranking system works. And it's not just something that's exclusive to Splatoon. For those of you who pay attention to college sports comes out with a top 25 ranking every week for each sport. And they do this same kind of method. They bring in sports writers and reporters who actually pay attention to the sports that are being played, and on a weekly basis they joke. I'm reading and talking at the same time. At the same time, they vote on who they think is the number one team, who they think is number 10, and then that ranking comes out each week. So this is the same kind of process. Now, there's different polls for each sport. Like, there'll be the AP poll, there'll be the one that only coaches vote on, and then for college football, near the end of the season, they actually have like a seeding council, like we see in Luti, that come in and rank out, like, these are the top 25 teams based off of the information we have. And so there's like 3 different polls they have there, but it's all the same kind of concept. You can't justifiably rank 211 teams accurately without some kind of debate. So bringing in experts who can figure that out is the right way to go about it. Here's why it doesn't work, though. First off, like I've said before, this is seeding just for Luti's tournament and not for the entire community as a whole. The reason that proves this is that divs are capped at 24 teams each. The reason for that is that Luti is a group stage tournament, and each division has 4 groups made up of 6 teams, i.e. 24 teams. You can't have 50 teams in one div and 20 in another, because the groups are not going to work out and the tournament's not going to work out like that. Which means you might have 50 teams that are somewhat even with each other. So much so that you could justifiably say all 50 of these teams are playing at a Div 5 level. If you look at just what's been going on in low ink, you could probably argue that, honestly, that there's about 30 to 40 teams that are at the same exact skill level. You can't really justify that one team is a full div over another. But since Luti only lets 24 teams into each division, you have to split hairs somehow. And splitting hairs between Division 5 and Division 6 is extremely critical in terms of that team's growth, just because if you're Div 5, you have access to better scrims than a team that gets placed in Div 6. Again, these teams could all be at the same skill level. It doesn't matter, because if you're Div 5, you are now in that Div 3 to 5 scrim server that Luti has. If you're Div 6, all of a sudden you only have access to teams in Div 7 and Div 8. So might not be the best situation for you if you're the team that gets bumped down to 6 when you could have been with all the other teams that are in Div 5. On the same note, where you get divved is based entirely on who all signs up. If FTWin were to register, they would get put at the top. And that means that everybody else gets pushed down. The worst team in Div 1 is now in Div 2. The worst team in Div 3 is now Div 4, etc., etc. Now, FTWin isn't a good example because, one, FTWin doesn't play in Luti as well as a bunch of other well-known top teams because they don't need to. And the reason they don't need to is because why would they? Luti is a 2-month tournament. I love playing in it. My team loves the strategy that comes with playing 1 match a week. But if you're FTWin, you could do a tournament in 1 weekend and get the same kind of experience, prize money, recognition than you could by playing in Luti and stressing out for a whole 2 weeks. And FT1 also isn't really a good example because there's this new X Plus division, which seems to have no limit on it into what teams are in there, which is how it should be if you were to do something like that, so that good teams that sign up don't bump everything down. But take a Div 1 team, like Knights of Queen. If they were to sign up, then everybody gets pushed down one. If they weren't, everybody gets pushed up one. So where you get landed in your seating for Luti depends entirely on who all signs up. If only 50 teams sign up for the next Luti season and my team is one of them, and all of a sudden my team is Div X, does that mean that I'm better than Knights of Queen? No. It just means I signed up for the tournament and they didn't. So I get a div and they do not. And on the flip side, teams that do not sign up for Luti don't get a div. So we got a bunch of these teams that are undivved, and then they'll scrim against other teams that are divved, and they'll like, oh, we beat these guys in a scrim, so that means we're better than them, and they were Div 3, so that means we're Div 2. So now we're going to put recruitment posts out there like, we're only looking for Div 2 recruits because we beat this team in a scrim. And they'll pick up people who put free agent posts of like, I do Div X scrims. Like that, like what does that even mean? You do Div X scrims? What? You played a game with Shaq or something like that. Okay, awesome. Now, with these flaws, well, actually, let me go back real quick, because a lot of teams sign up for Luti, and this is an issue. A lot of teams sign up for Luti just for the fact of getting a div. You'll see a lot of teams that will sign up, and when they get divved, will either immediately drop from Luti, or will just disband altogether. Because it's like, well, Luti says we're Div 5, so we failed as a team. Let's disband. And you also see a lot of teams that just absolutely complain about the div that they get, which is understandable. If I feel like my team's been underranked in something, I get miffed by it, and everyone else does as well. It's completely understandable. I don't think I've ever publicly thrown a hissy fit about it. But Luti provides a really great channel for people to do just that. And basically, when people throw a hissy fit, nobody, the Luti staff just basically be like, they don't care. And why should they? They really shouldn't. But it is kind of interesting to see. But for a lot of times, those people that complain about the div that they got, the good thing about Luti is you can prove them wrong. Squid Vibes got put in Div 5. They were upset about it, and they proved Luti staff wrong. They completely destroyed Div 5 without a second thought. So they proved that they were a little bit better than that. In Div 4, on the other hand, you had a lot of teams that were upset about that, thinking that they were a Div 3 team. In fact, in my team's group, Destiny Troops, 3 of the 6 teams complained in the help desk about the div that they received. One of them even said, well, I guess we're just going to have to beat Div 4 just to prove that you guys are idiots. All 3 of those teams failed to make the playoffs. My team beat all 3 of them. In fact, Day Old Sushi made the playoffs as well. Imagine that. The 2 teams in that group that had multiple people that were in their 30s knew to just keep their heads down and play the matches and not complain, and worked out for them. I'm sure there's several other examples of that from the last Luti season. But, like I said, despite all of these flaws, this still is a justifiable ranking system for the Splatoon community. Because, like I said, it brings in a group of experts, they look at everything, they rank them, and it's fine. If it wasn't for this one fatal flaw that comes with all of this, and that is the Luti divs only get updated 1 to 2 times a year. That's it. And, and that sucks, because these Luti divs, when they first come out, they're great. They're awesome. But they stop being relevant around like div. I'm reading chat again. They stop being relevant around week 4. After about 4 weeks of playing the Luti matches, pretty much every team can look at themselves and be like, okay, we're actually a little bit better than the rest of this group. Or like, oh gosh, we are not ready for this div. We should be down. We got overrated a little bit. The problem is, whatever number you got, you're stuck with it, sweetheart, for the rest of the year. Possibly even longer than that. Because, again, is it realistic? It's really not. It's really unrealistic to think that Luti would come in and redo rankings once a month, which is something we would really need if we wanted a community-wide ranking system. It would need to be something monthly instead of biannually, or semi-annually, I guess would be the correct term there. But for people to come in, get 7 to 10 people to come in and rank 211 teams once a month, that's really just unrealistic. That's a lot of work for people and a lot of time for people to be donating, just for people to complain about the div that they get once a month. But the last divs come out in April, and that's why we're starting to see all these teams that are just like, screw it, we're div 2 now. You can't tell us otherwise. And it's like, oh, I guess technically we can't. And here's where the real frustration comes in. Again, I'll use my team as an example. Just look at what my team did last month alone. Here's the teams that we beat in SOS and Testing Grounds. We beat Wisteria, Massacre, Persistence, Red Sun, Reptile Gang, which is now Helix and used to be Optimum, Ink Pressure, and Carnage Gaming. So if you looked at just that, forget about the fact of what my team did back before Luti season happened. You look at that and you think, okay, cool. Maybe Destiny Troops is about middle of the pack Div 3, which is, in my mind, where I think we are right now. The problem with that is, it doesn't matter what I think my team is, and it doesn't matter what you think my team is. Because when I go to the Luti server to look for a scrim, which is the biggest active scrim server that I am aware of in this entire community, I will ask for a scrim, and a team will click on my name, and they will see Div 4 next to me, and that number is going to be stuck with me forever until Luti seeds get updated. So teams are going to make decisions based off of that, of whether to scrim us or not, on information that hasn't been updated in 6 months. And that's where the frustration lies. And I know a lot of other teams have that same kind of frustration as well. So obviously, we need a better system. We need an actual ranking system for this community. That's something Magic kind of talked about as well. He mentioned Squid Tracks as being a good alternative. That's something I don't really look into much. But what can we do to actually offer a better ranking system? Me personally, I'm pretty good at identifying what problems are without offering a solution. But I know I know where we can start though. First off, we need to identify what these divs or what the lower level of the community is, what the mid level is, and what the high level of the community is. I think if we can break things down into 3 different categories, then it's easier to rank teams in just those specific categories versus ranking the entire community as a whole, which I don't even know how many teams we have in the community that are active just in the West by itself. I don't want to throw out a number because I don't even have an idea where to start, to be honest with you. It's more than 211 that signed up for last Luti season. But what is the lower level of the Splatoon community? Like, does anybody know? like we all have our theories, but I mean, none of the theories even line up. Is it based off of what division you are? Like, is it everybody that's Div 4 and below? Well, I just kind of proved that's kind of nonsense because your div is no longer relevant after 1 month that you get it. So my team is Div 4. Are we still in the lower level? If you looked at what we did last month, the teams we beat, would you still put us in the lower level? I guess technically you could. Do you do it by low ink, just like low ink standards? I guess you could. Low ink is a pretty good barometer, I guess. But then the problem is, if you win low ink, does that mean like we're officially graduating you out of the lower level up to the mid level? It's just based off of what you do on one weekend versus what you do in an entire month. What about SAC? Yeah, is SAC considered the lower level? I guess so. You could make the argument for that. The counter argument is, and a lot of you know this, Div 2 teams play in SAC. Now, they might not start off the SAC season as Div 2, but Luti always seems to creep its head around the middle of SAC, and they'll take like the top 4 teams and give them Div 2. So all of a sudden, the best teams in SAC have an official Div 2, but they get to finish out the season beating up on Div 6 teams until we get to the top 8 there. So if you go by SAC, then technically the lower level includes like the bottom portion of Div 2, and that is insane to me. That is absolutely insane to me. So I don't know where these cutoffs lie, but I feel like it's important for us as a community to establish where these cutoffs lie. What officially qualifies a team as being mid-level or high level, or what keeps them in the lower level? And again, the reason it's important to kind of qualify this is that we can start ranking these teams just based off of these groups alone. For example, if we could do that, and instead of ranking every single team in each category, and we just did, here are the top 25 this month, and then we come up with some sort of council or group that looks just specifically at each group and ranks, here's the top 25 mid-level teams in this month. I feel like we as a community could do something like that. We could just establish a group that focuses mainly on each group, a council that focuses mainly on each group, and come up with a ranking system for something like that. A good example of how this works is SAC. SAC, after each tournament that they do, releases a new top 32 SAC team ranking list. So SAC tournaments are bi-weekly. So this ranking comes out twice or once every 2 weeks, which is great. It's fantastic. And they also kind of release like their justification for why they put each team where they do. And it's not just like, oh, well, this team won this tournament, so they're automatically taking the new number 1 spot. No, they look at everything as a whole, not just who's hot right now, but who has put up the most consistent resume over the course of the season. And now, is the SAC ranking perfect? No. I think a top 32 is too much, because there was only like 50-ish teams, so that means mostly everybody was ranked. So that just means if you weren't ranked, that just made you feel even worse. I feel like a top 20 or a top 25 is more justifiable and is easier for SAC staff. And of course, with any ranking system like that, every team is going to look at it and be like, well, why am I number 20? I beat the team that's number 19. I feel like I should be higher than that. Because in all honesty, that's part of the fun of rankings is the debate about it. And in theory, they don't really mean a whole heck of a lot, other than seeding for tournaments, which is actually really important, which is why another reason why Luti divs are kind of frustrating. But I feel like TOs don't look at Luti divs anymore when they do seedings for double limb or seeded Swiss tournaments anyways. And another example that I do specifically is when I do my low ink previews, I do my top 10 low ink teams that I feel like are going to win. But that's not, again, that's not my top 10. These are the top 10 teams in the lower level community. I've just put, these are my top 10 teams that I feel like are going to win low ink. Now, take for example, 2 months ago. Let me drink water. Hold on. 2 months ago, I put Luau at number 4 on my top 10 list, and they ended up winning the tournament. That doesn't mean next month that I bump them up to number 1. No, they won the tournament. They're banned from low ink, so they're completely off the list. So it's not fair to use like my top 10 as an actual ranking for everything, because it's just for one niche category, which is the top 10 teams who can win one tournament. And that's not me saying I might put Persistence at number 6, and I might put teams above them. That doesn't mean I think Persistence can't beat them. It just means that I feel like Persistence historically in low ink wouldn't beat them, versus if they were to play in another tournament like SOS, where Persistence going to have like a stronger roster or something like that, which we have seen stronger Persistence teams in SOS than we have in low ink. But I think a top 25 high level, mid level, and low level teams that we could update monthly. Maybe there's some way that teams can submit their resumes, because it's impossible to look at every single team. But if we just look at teams in a section of a group, it might be a little bit easier to rank them with something like that. And then we could have multiple different polls with multiple different opinions. There's the Popcast top 25 teams in the lower level community versus here's the Hoenn Hero top 25 in the low level community. They might be different, they might be the same, but that still kind of gives us a updated monthly understanding of where teams kind of lie. A good example of this is these vote-in servers that we have, these pickup draft servers. Not like Launchpoint, because it's not a vote-in, it's more of an application process. But like Midpoint, +1, +2, how do all those work? People vote in the team, or vote in players, and players that get the most votes get in. But if you look, the players are also getting ranked by their votes. The players that get the most votes are like the number 1. The players at like 50% are at like number 80 or wherever, depending on whatever server that you're signing up for. If we could do that for something like a team setting, instead of voting for individual players, we're voting for individual teams, I think that would work out to some extent. Is it going to be biased? Is it going to be full of idiots voting? Is it going to have major flaws to it? Absolutely. But look at the system we already got, people. Is it better than Luti divs being updated once a month? Once a year? Absolutely. And I'm not suggesting these things as like the perfect fix for everything. I'm just trying to get the conversation started, because we need a ranking system in this community that is accurate, that is updated, that is updatable, and is something that everybody can agree on to an extent, versus teams that are just like, I'm Div 2 now, screw it, which is what we're starting to see a lot of. In the meantime, in conclusion, as I start to wrap this up, until we get something like that, until we have an actual ranking system of some sort, if you're a team, don't be like the teams that complain about their Luti div and say, oh, well, we're just underrated, so we're just going to destroy everything we play in. No, keep your head down, play in as many tournaments as you can, and get results. Then when it comes time for a ranking to actually come out, you have a resume to kind of stand on to defend yourself if you get under or overrated, either way. And when you guys do good in tournaments, you guys that pay attention to the podcast, you know I pay attention to those things. When you guys do good in tournaments, you know I see it because I talk about it every single week. And you know, it's not just the teams that win these tournaments. I'm looking at teams that finish, that don't qualify for Gamma Bracket but still have a good result. I'm looking at teams that barely qualify for Gamma Bracket and then do some actual damage in it. I'm looking at teams that are playing in Little Squid League, that are getting upsets against teams that are much better than them on paper. Even though they might not win the tournament, they're still getting those 1 to 2 wins that catch people's attention. You guys know I pay attention to stuff like that. Other people do as well. So, go get your results. And let the rankings and the divs and all that stuff handle itself. Is this going to stop teams from claiming their div whatever? I don't care. I don't care what div you claim you are. Until things get updated, don't worry about that nonsense. Keep your head down, play these games, and just have fun. And that is the end of my 40-minute rant. I did not keep up with chat at all. Lemonade said it makes a lot of sense. I'm assuming you're saying everything that I've been saying today has made a lot of sense. That's awesome. New system needs to handle more than SAC or any subset. Yes, exactly. It's I'm mainly saying those kind of things because that's what's relevant to me. Is like the lower level community. Like I don't, obviously I'm aware of what goes on in like higher level tournaments. I paid attention to Ink to Pink, but I didn't play in it. So I only paid attention mainly to like Xanadu, Persistence, and Xylo, in Oblivion, mainly just to see what they were doing. I sound like a preacher towards the end there. I guess I'm kind of dressed like a preacher today, so that makes sense to an extent. All right. Let's talk about Launchpoint and then wrap this up for today. So Launchpoint had its first ever draft cup this past weekend, and it was awesome. Initially, I knew the draft cup was happening, and it was in like the wheelhouse of things that a wheelhouse of things that I should be covering on something like the Popcast, because the Launchpoint is clearly lower level community stuff, which is what my focus is on. But I didn't really know if there's going to be a lot I could talk about it specifically. But after I got home from work on Saturday, and my wife and I sat on our couch, cuddled up on our couch, and watched Splatoon, as most couples do in 2020, I'm assuming. And I watched Grand Finals. It kind of came clear to me. It's like, oh, there's actually a lot I could talk about with this tournament. So I am going to give like a brief recap, not as in-depth as I would do for something like Low Ink or the other tournaments like such as. But I do want to talk about it to an extent. First off, how the teams were built. This was so basically this information is coming from my wife, who I just asked literally right before we started this, because she played in this tournament. She said that you turn in like an application when you signed up for the tournament, and then the staff that run Launchpoint put all the teams together themselves. That's kind of ballsy, in my opinion. I think you could leave yourself open as staff to all kinds of interpretations of complaining. Now, that's not the only tournament that does something like that. It's dangerous to go alone. I don't know if these guys still do this or not, but that was the first tournament I ever played in. That was the same thing. You signed up, you like told them like what your ranks were, because back in those days, like very few people had X ranks, and it actually meant something to have an X rank. And they would just build teams off of that. And and there were always people that complained like, "Oh, you made this team too good," or "My team sucks," or something like that, which is understandable. Um, but at the same time, I don't think there is a perfect way to build the teams from a free agent thing. Midpoint last time had a draft system, but even then, it was still based on like staff interpretation of how good players were. Like each player got a number assigned to them, and you could only draft enough players to like you couldn't have more than 8 points on your team. So if you drafted somebody that had 5 points, then you could only draft someone that had 2 points or 1 point right after that. So, but as weird as that is, that's even a little bit better because people can't complain because they're the ones who built the team, right? So if somebody was like, these teams are unbalanced, it was like, well, it's your fault. You're the one who drafted your own team, dummy. Versus the staff being like, oh, we're the ones who picked these teams. Oh crap. Um, but for the most part, just looking at the standings in this tournament, it looked like staff did a pretty good job of building a solid fair tournament here. Nobody went undefeated in Swiss. Everybody won at least one game. You got a lot of teams that are 4-1, 3-2, two. So it looks really even across the board. So nicely done there, uh, Launchpoint staff for building teams. Um, and I would assume people still complain anyways, but that comes with the territory. Now, before we start looking into the matches here, we need to talk about some of these names. Some of these team names are just flat out unacceptable. First off, you got some really simple ones, right? Funny push. Fine. You can read that. It makes sense. Comeback spirits, assault weapon bags. These are fine. All these names are fine. You don't need something flashy. You just need something that's readable, right? Which some teams just flat out did not do. You had a couple of teams that just went with the approach of let's just take the first letter of each team member and just make a four-letter word, right? So you got SMFC, and then you got Skim, SKIM. So that works out, I guess. Um, you got this team. I don't know what Bingus fan club. I don't know if I'm gonna get banned from Twitch for saying the word Bingus. So you basically got a bunch of teams that are named after memes that an old fart like me doesn't keep up with. But I'm sure is funny to somebody. So no offense to Bingus people that are in a Bingus fan club. That is the last time I'm going to say the word Bingus on stream. Um, you got this team. Okay, Squids of the Filth. I believe this was Pariah's team. And so this is actually kind of clever because Squids of the Filth used to be an actual team. I think it was a team that Pariah's was on back before Splatforce. So that it makes sense. So like this team name pays homage to an older team and at the same time still sounds unique and fresh and is readable. So that's like, okay, that's clever. I like that. Thumbs up for that. To the two teams, though, that just bashed their forehead on a keyboard and went with whatever nonsense came up from that, I'm going to read off the two team names here as they're presented. This team finished number 10 in the standings. Hyper Nervo Kusala Ada Frag Macaroni Travi Bratorner. Okay, and that's all one word. The other team that finished right below them at number 11, Landfair, Pelagian Warkler, Gorger, Schwander, Drobble, Will, Anthras, Silliger, Go Gooch. Come on. Dude, like, oh my gosh. And then to round it all out, Krusty Kraken, Citrus Death Warriors. Guys, come on. We can do better. We can do better than this. We can do so much better than this. I swear, stop summoning the dead. Yeah, there's going to be some zombie pop up in the background in the next couple of minutes. I think Roundy, I don't know if Roundy's still in this chat, but he made a hilarious tweet several months ago, calling out pickup teams for just naming themselves. I don't know what to call this team, and then offering a business to give out names for this. Launchpoint and Midpoint need to hire Roundy to force names upon these teams that are actually legible, understandable, and make some sort of sense. There were three in one tournament. They were just like, I don't know what to call ourselves, and it's like, okay, well, what if I don't know plays I don't know in the tournament or something like that? So please take advantage of this new service that Roundy is offering, that can really benefit the entire community. And yeah, I saw a Wiggler Adventure Time or something like that, in the CCA tournament, because I saw you guys won that. It's very nice. Krusty Crew plus Whackin' Kraken Warriors. Oh, that makes sense actually. Oh, Krusty Kraken Citrus Death Warriors. That okay? So those were all the teams that those players came from: Citrus, Kraken Warriors, Krusty Crew, probably Death Lights or Death Wish. We got too many death teams in the lower level community. Anyways, that's enough of me being the old man, get off my lawn kind of approach that I'm taking here. Let's talk about some of these matches to the sense here. Usually I do like a winner roll, and like here's the team that really played well or something like that. I don't know the full roster of all these teams, so the only things I can really talk about are the things that I saw on stream. A cool thing that you did kind of see with this tournament in the first game, which was Larfenarger Schmuttergucci Gooch team or whatever. Um, who did they play against? I forget who they played against. Um, but it was, we saw a lot of teammates playing against each other, which was really cool. We saw, in the first game we saw Bowen versus Furion of Geek Squids. So it's cool to see those kinds of matchups. And another cool thing about this tournament is the kind of networking that teams and players get to do with each other. So you bring in a bunch of teams with different backgrounds, different age groups, different play styles, different weapons, and so it's kind of cool to see things like that. You've probably played against several people that you were matched up with in Low Ink and in Little Squid League and other tournaments several times, but you might never have actually talked to the person behind the weapon that you're always playing against. So now you might get matched up with that person, which is really cool, and is an interesting way to kind of grow a community as a whole by meeting players on the other team. My body is exploding here. Or in the Geek Squids case, you can just play against your own teammates, which there were several Geek Squid players in this tournament, which is fun to see. A good game on stream was Squids of the Filth versus Comeback Spirits. It looked, both these teams finished pretty well. Comeback Spirits finished 4-1 and number one in the ranking. Squids of the Filth just missed top cut. Squids of the Filth, the players that I recognized were Pariahs of Splatforce and Japanda, who I sometimes accidentally call Japanada, from Tooniverse. Comeback Spirits had Omega from Splat or Swim, Tenshi from a team I don't really recognize, Sashimi from a team I don't really recognize, and there was one other player that I forgot to write down that I did actually recognize, which I'm gonna look up right now, honestly, because that was Jennifer. Yes, Jennifer, and that's important. Jennifer from Enigma was a really solid player. When I first saw Comeback Spirits roster, so here's what you need, in my opinion. What you need to be a good team in these like draft tournaments or like these pickup tournaments where every team is at the same disadvantage of being a pickup team. You want one solid player who can hold down the support. It doesn't need to be an anchor or something, but if you can get one armor bot who is really good at running junior or NZAP, that is like the foundation that you can build the rest of your team on. I also think it's really important to have one player who is just a jack of all trades that can do pretty much anything that is missing. Because with the 4 players you get, you're likely going to be missing something significant. So if you'd have one player that can just morph into whatever kind of hole is missing, then you're going to be in a pretty solid. You're going to be a pretty solid team for this tournament. So Comeback Spirits had just that. They had Jennifer from Enigma, which is made up of players from Cosmic Inc. And we haven't gotten to see Enigma yet in some other tournaments, but when we do, they're going to make a big splash because they seem like a pretty strong team. And Jennifer, I played against Jennifer when they were with Cosmic Inc. Jennifer's pretty cracked, not going to lie, especially as an armor bot. One of the better armor bots in the lower level community. And then you got Omega, who I am convinced just types in double exclamation point, random weapon, and just plays whatever weapon pops up. Here's the weapons. I love watching Omega on stream because you have no idea what they're gonna do. Here's in the first 5 games we saw Omega play on stream. Carbon Roller, Tetra, Blob Obbler, Nautilus, K-Shot. So yeah, there you go. There's your player that can morph into what's missing, and there's your solid armor bot. That's the foundation you can build a team off of. Tenchi was a pretty solid anchor player. I've never really heard of them, but they were pretty solid on E-Leader and Bamboo, or at least from the games we saw on stream. Whenever the spectator cam flipped to Tenchi, they were landing shots with the E-Leader. It was pretty impressive. And Shishimi, don't really know too well, but seemed to be doing pretty well on K-Pro. So it just looking at that roster alone, it makes sense to me why they finished number 1 after Swiss at 4-1 there. For Squids of the Filth, again, seemed like a pretty strong team, and they seem pretty competitive with this Comeback Spirits team. Just missed Top Cup there. It was interesting seeing Japanda using Junior at one point instead of CDS. But again, when you do like a draft tournament like this, at some point you're going to have to come off of your main or the weapon you're kind of known for to help fit the comp of the entire team. So that was interesting to see. What other teams did we see on stream here? We saw the Hyper Team versus Squid Adventure Time. This one went 2-1 in favor of Squid Adventure Time. The Hyper Team was made up of a lot of players I somewhat know. Nebula from Tyrant Inc. Karma, who used to be on Down, used to be on CIA. So I'm just going to say, I think she's a free agent right now. But she's a part of the Salty Sisters, so I'll give her credit for that. Lilith, who isn't on a team, but had an FA tag in their name, is a free agent, and that's wonderful. As somebody who's just paying attention from the outside of this tournament, who's wondering what teams these guys are actually on, when somebody's not on a team and they just put FA in their name, it's like, okay, perfect. This is perfect. This person's a free agent. And that, honestly, if you're a free agent playing in this tournament, putting FA, making it known you're a free agent is a really smart thing to do. And then just Kyle. I don't know who Kyle is for Hyper. For Squid Adventure Time, Niski from Splatarians, River from CIA, Jaden from Twisted Tranquility, and Mist Popgun from Tooniverse. Again, this matchup, both teams went Squid Adventure Time 2-1. And it seemed like all 8 players in this match were pretty even. You saw a lot of high KAs. It was a pretty good match to watch in general. Miss Popgun on Junior for Squid Adventure Time played exceptionally well. And I'm not just saying that because I think she has a really nice ass. I'm just saying she did a good job. Let's look at some other... Funny Push played Comeback Spirits on stream again. That was... I don't know how Comeback Spirits ended up on stream like that. But it was good to see them play against Funny Push. Funny Push is the team that eventually won the entire tournament. They finished number 4 in the standings. Their players were Riley, who used to be on Tropics, but is now a free agent. Um, Jay Turdster, Evie on Apocalyptic Inc. And by the way, Evie absolutely dominated grand finals, which I'll get to later. And Apple of the oh gosh, what am I thinking? I'm drawing a blank here. I know what these guys are because I talk about them every single week, and I always say the. I'm gonna take time to actually look that up. I believe it's the Octo Squids. I'll come back to that. I'll look that up because I know what that one is. The deep, there it is. Thank you, honey. The deep fried octolings. I knew it was octolings, and I was thinking of like tempura shrimp. So I was like, well, because I always think them as like onion rings when I think of that team. But the deep fried octolings, yes. Now I talk about this team a lot, and the reason I draw a blank when I come up with their name is that I don't ever see them on stream in any tournament that we ever do. So like I see they're always finishing around middle of the pack. They're always taking games off of good teams. They're making noise, but we never actually get to see them. And I had no idea who the players on the team were. I just knew the name. So now that I actually got to see Apple play and saw how insane Apple is, it's starting to kind of click to me. It's like, okay, the deep fried octolings might have something here. We need to see these guys actually play on stream at some point in other tournaments to see what the whole team as an offer has to hold. But just Apple by themselves, not too shabby. Other matches of note here, Bags versus Strinfort's Minions. So when I was talking about team names, there's the other approach you can do, which is let your captain just call the team after themselves, which I've tried to do several times. But for some reason, the fighting pop gun gets voted down every single time I suggest it. So it is what it is. But Strinfort's Minions, Strinforth of Geek Squids, another Geek Squid player, playing Bags in round one. Other players on Strinfort's Minions were Mark of CIA, Copy from I have no idea, and I couldn't pronounce the name of the other player, and I don't know what team they were on as well. For Team Bags, though, we had Armuno from Kraken Warriors, Bucket that played on a team that that did play in the last low ink, but we made them change their name because it's inappropriate, so I'm not going to read their name out loud. I don't know what team Zima is on. And then somebody called Gaysicle from a team I've never really heard of called It App. But they seem to be pretty good. By the way, Gaysicle, in my opinion, best tent player in the lower level community, bar none. Might be the only tent player in the lower level community, so by default is also the worst. But pretty strong showing from Team Bags here. And Team Bags did win this one. I think 3-1, either 3-1 or 3-2. However, Strinfort from Geek Squids, in a losing effort, absolutely dominated this set. At one point, in a game that they lost, had 18 KA with Kinsa L3. In a game they did won, Tower Control at Anchovy game, popped off with 25 KA. So Strinfort, I absolutely deserves some credit there, even though they lost this game, because they put on a show and got some attention there. So repping the Geek Squids there, even though they did not get the win. In grand finals, we saw Funny Push versus Assault Weapon, which is a new team for me to be talking about. Assault Weapon had Fish from Aloptic, Milk from Krill Streak. Krill Streak, where have you guys been? I love you guys. Sign up for more tournaments. Come back. Are you guys bitten from the college bug or something? Well, I want some more krill streak in my life. Come on back, guys. And then Des from I don't know where, and Savelis from I couldn't find where that person was from specifically either. Hey, if you guys aren't on a team, put an FA tag in your name like Lilith did. Or something that kind of indicates that you're not on a team or something. Or if you're actually on a team, put your team's tag in there. Rep your team. These draft cups are like the SAC All Star. They're cool because you get to see the mix of people where you're from. So if you're on a team, put your tag on there. Rep your team. Get some clout out there for you guys. Assault Weapon won this one. Oh no, what am I saying? Funny Push won this one. It was a close set. That could have gone either way. There was a close Rainmaker game where it looked like Assault Weapon was going to go up 2-0, but Funny Push was able to squeak out a Funny Push, and then from there to tie the whole setup at 1-1, and this was able to kind of take care of things from there. So a nice win overall by Funny Push. I don't know. I should have looked this up, but I don't know if they won something. Whether it be like an art prize, or I'm sure they got a roll or something like that. But what they did win was some recognition for how well that they played. So congratulations to them. In conclusion, the coolest thing I saw throughout this entire tournament, you want a keychain. Okay, that's actually pretty dope. The coolest thing I saw in this entire tournament was watching stream and seeing players that I recognize from other teams that weren't currently on stream that were rooting for all the other teams that were on there. The lower level community through this tournament showed just how wholesome and awesome that they really are. People were cheering for each other. People were rooting on other teams. People were just rooting for the tournament as a whole. I saw so many different players in chat. And this tournament got a lot of attention, which it should have. But it was really nice to see all the people coming out and just being wholesomely excited to see a tournament happen, rooting for their real teammates and rooting for teams that they just enjoy seeing and players that they got to know. I hope we see more launch points in the future. It sounds like we will, because this tournament is doing a lot to bringing the entire lower level community together, which is really, really important if we want to grow out. You guys look at Twitter last week, and I know you did. There is a lot of bull crap on Twitter right now. Things like this are what we should be talking about, though. The things like this wholesome chat that we had in the Launchpoint tournament stream, that's what we should be pointing to, because that is what is the real foundation that we can grow this entire community on. That kind of excitement, not the other bull crap we see of people complaining about absolute nonsense that's usually on Twitter. So let's keep the conversation on the bright things that we see. And with that, I have reached the end of my note. I usually on Mondays I go into work, and Mondays are kind of slow, so I actually type out things. But I can't go into work now because I'm obviously doing this right here. So instead of typing out stuff, I just kind of wrote it down. I wrote it down on a sheet of paper that I could find, which is something I'm going to carve into a pumpkin later this week. So I just read an entire Popcast episode from a Mario 3 image there. But that's it. That's the end of today's episode. I'm going to go get ready to go to work, possibly eat some food. Thank you guys for listening. If you would like to be a part of the podcast in any way, you can reach out to me on Twitter at Mr_Popgun, on YouTube at 25Popgun, Twitch at Popgun25, and on Discord at Popgun #5882. I do not save my VODs on Twitch anymore. I save them all on YouTube. So if you want to see this, I will put it up on YouTube later outside of the 2 month or 2 week period that it saves it by itself. I'll probably highlight the Luti rant because I know that's what a lot of you came here for anyways. But we're going to go visit Falco Flyer. Once again, thank you for listening. If you guys go out in public, I don't care what your state says, wear a mask, you idiots. And make sure it covers your nose because I know you guys breathe through your nose at some point. You have to.